On today's show, we'll be joined by weekly co-host Alykhan Bijani to discuss, should the Houston Rockets entertain the idea of bringing James Harden back to Houston this upcoming offseason when they have all this cap room available? What are the pros and cons to bringing Harden back to Houston? We're going to break down all of that and more coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays, host of the State of the Rockets podcast, as well as Rockets Watch. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin. The show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where you can help the show out tremendously by commenting anything below. Would you want to see James Harden back in Houston? Let us know in the YouTube comments. Now, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, none other than Alykhan Bijani, the X's and O's man. Of course, you can follow on Twitter at Rockets_Insider. And you know what, Alykhan? I guess it's pretty appropriate that you showed up to Toyota Center the other day wearing a James Harden era t-shirt, because that's who we're talking about on today's Locked On Rockets. We were taking a much deserved detour away from the current iteration of Houston Rockets to kind of take a journey down hypothetical lane, if you will, as to what may or may not happen this upcoming NBA offseason, because the reason we are talking about James Harden on today's show is Tim MacMahon, ESPN's Tim MacMahon, dropped a little news bite on the Howdy Partners podcast, basically saying that the gossip currently swirling around the league from the people that he's talked to is to watch out for a potential James Harden return to Houston if it doesn't work out in Philadelphia. Now, this is something that we have brought up as a possibility here on this very podcast before. You and I have discussed it. I've discussed it with Ben Dubose. I've discussed it ad nauseum with a lot of different voices. I've given my own thoughts on this. But as it currently stands, right now, at, December 20th, 2022, I do not think that James Harden returning to the Rockets would be the right move for a variety of reasons that we are going to unpack here in just a moment. I believe you have an alternative viewpoint on this, right?
Jackson Gatlin.
I can't take you seriously.
Native Houstonian.
Oh, God.
Completely wrong about the whole James Harden potential coming back here. Have you watched the Houston Rockets play basketball, Jackson?
Unfortunately, yes.
Do you see how much they struggle just getting into something?
Yes.
And you're telling me the guy who likes to get into things slowly and methodically would not help this team?
I think no, and we're gonna just have so many different arguments back and forth on this podcast. It's okay. It's gonna be a good show because I agree, right? This Rockets team, as it currently stands, could benefit from the addition of James Harden, right? We've talked about, and a lot of this debate, is going to come down to kind of the most divisive topic amongst Rockets Twitter, Rockets fans right now is the fact that, hey, the Rockets are in desperate need of like a legitimate point guard, right? And James Harden is walking
Kevin
20 and
Porter
10.
Jr. is not a point guard?
Oh my God. Your eyes got so big.
I thought he was averaging like double-digit assists or something, Jackson. Why are you so down on Kevin Porter Jr.?
Man.
APJ, Scoot, man. You're down on Scoot?
I'm just a hater,
You're
bro.
a Rockets media member. You're supposed to root for the team, Jackson. Why aren't you rooting for the team? You're a media member. Media member roots for the team, right?
If you guys can't tell, Alykhan is fed up about the KPJ discourse as he smiles off on his camera. Yeah, look, I get it, right? And the Rockets have a ton of cap room this upcoming offseason. That's why it's even a discussion. You have James Harden, who signed the 1+1 deal in Philadelphia, so he's got flexibility moving forward with his future. And I think there's this, there's almost like a kind of like a fairy tale kind of narrative around it, right? It's very LeBron James-esque in the way that, right, LeBron left Cleveland, gave that city everything he had. Gave Cleveland everything that he had, right, for years. Yeah, you sounded like Mickey Mouse. I don't know what that was about. Is that because you don't believe in LeBron's Mickey Mouse ring? Let
Mickey James. Okay,
oh God, usually it takes us much longer to derail the show, but this is in segment 1. This is like we're in rare form today. But right, I mean, it can be compared to that situation, right, where LeBron left Cleveland, goes, wins his rings with Miami, spends his 4 years there, and he comes back to Cleveland, right, and he promises to bring them a ring, and he does, and James Harden, when he left Houston, right, the one thing he said is he was like, he said, what was it? The marathon continues. And he kind of he didn't make a direct promise, but it was like he's referred to Houston constantly as home. He, is still so connected to the city, still does a lot of philanthropic work, in and around the Houston area. This is James Harden's home. And I truly do believe that. And anybody, that is close to him or has covered him for a long time believes that as well. Like his heart is tied to the city of Houston for sure. Does that mean that him coming back to Houston would be the right thing for this Rockets organization? I don't think it would be. Alykhan, you believe the opposite, and we are going to break that down even further coming up in just a moment. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user manual, right? It'd be nice if it did, right? A little step-by-step, like do this, do why, but that's not how it works, right? So when life isn't working for you, it's normal to, feel stuck, right? Maybe you're dealing with, a significant change in your life, right? It could be a career change. It could be a new relationship, maybe become a parent, getting married, whatever, it could be anything, right? Therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of life, right? Of helping you walk through some of the things that you are dealing with. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. Plus, it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, after voicing my concern about a potential James Harden return to Houston on Twitter, it seems kind of split 50-50, at least right now. There's some Rockets fans who are very much for the idea of James Harden coming back to Houston, and then there seems to be some Rockets fans who are very much against the idea. I find myself in the latter of that group, and for a variety of reasons. Alykhan, I'm just going to start with the biggest, most glaring one is James Harden is 33 years old, right? He is an aging star. He's already shown some signs of regression. Granted, he's coming off the hamstring injury and everything, but he doesn't have the same explosiveness that he used to. He's not the same. He's not the same James Harden. You're
wearing a cap that says the letter H on it, and that H stands for hater. You're a James Harden hater.
Okay, let me get my bars off, and then you can. This is how. Did you never take debate in high school? All right, shut up. It's my turn right now. I'm Skip Bayless, and it's my turn. It's my turn, Alykhan. My turn. So, aging, and this is gonna be this summer. Whether it's Houston, whether it's a new deal with Philly, whether it's a completely different team, this is going to be James Harden's last significant, large payday as a player. And to me, the worst thing that this young Rockets team could do would be to pay a max or a near max deal to an aging James Harden, who will be 34 years old before the following season starts. So before the 2023-2024 campaign starts, and James Harden would be back in Houston, whenever he would be 34 years of age. You want to pay that guy 4 years, whatever, 120 million, 150 million, whatever a max contract would be for James Harden. Paying him that money, to me, screams mistake. Because I don't expect James Harden he's not going to age poorly, but I don't expect his game to stay at this current level, which is still a top 20 player, top 15 player, give or take. I don't expect this level of play to stay over the lifeline of that contract. So that's my opening argument against the idea of signing James Harden back. Feel free to counter.
If the biggest point you're going to make is payment, which, has definitely some great merit too, then I think
I've got other points. That's my biggest one. I've got many other points.
Well, that's something. If that's your biggest point, I think we're gonna have a pretty easy conversation here, Jackson. But I will say one thing before we get into those points. When it comes to paying a guy, I think there's a lot of, data around the league that when you pay an aging star high money, it does not necessarily work out for you, right? So I will give you that. Now, what I will say though is I think you could make it worthwhile to James and worthwhile to Houston. Now, when you're looking at translatable skills, I'm gonna use that term. I think translatable skills are really.
Can you say the word that you want to use?
Transferable skills. Sorry, not transferable skills. I meant to say transferable. There's transferable skills from a superstar in their prime to somebody who's towards the tail end of a career. And I think a couple of things are IQ, maturity, able to play your game and stick to it and not get out of rhythm, and knowing who you are as a player. And all those different qualities James has, and he's going to continue to have, and it's going to allow him to be successful. Now, does that mean he's worth $45-50 million a year? I don't think so. But I do think I think reasonably you can give him $30-35 million for 3 years to allow him to come here, be your starting point guard, and, get this team right. I think you're starting to see the data that Jalen can play well with the ball, but he's also very good off the ball. You allow a guy who can get him the ball off those curls, off those handoffs, off those situations where he's coming on the run, allows him to be successful. Get a guy who can make a good entry pass and a good lob to Sengun, get him going. Get a guy who can play with vertical spacing.
Lob threat,
right? Get him going. Get a guy who can actually, oh my God, Jackson, my biggest pet peeve about this season for the Rockets ball handlers. Can somebody make a cross-court pass to an open shooter? Oh my God. Well, you know what? James Harden can. Just for those reasons alone, and that nobody's going to be able to take him off his game. He can stay at his own rhythm. For those reasons alone, I think it's worth paying him the money.
Okay. And I hear every single one of those points. I agree with every single one of those points. I think James Harden would be an immediate monumental upgrade to this Rockets team, and he would resolve a lot of the current issues that this group of guys is facing, right? I think conversely, there are two sides of the basketball. James Harden is a below average perimeter defender, and that is not going to get better.
Do you not watch him in the post? Jackson Gatlin, do you not see how he dominates post defense? And
I'm sorry, I didn't realize they were going to sign James Harden to play center. Is that what we're doing? You're signing James Harden to play center and bench Alperen Sengun for James Harden?
Clearly the Rockets already do that. So that's neither here or there. But anyway,
look, right? But so look, if you're looking at a starting backcourt of James Harden and Jalen Green, like that, and that's your starting backcourt, right? The best, the teams where James Harden has been at his best, right, have been teams that can kind of mask and hide his defensive deficiencies. That's never who he's been as a player. James Harden can dial in when he needs to. He absolutely can. But he is not a defender over the course of an entire 48-minute basketball game. And to have that guy be your best guy in leading this group of young guys, right? Young guys who you want to start, establishing an identity and a culture, and who you do not want to be reading bad habits off of. I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, if you had, and here's where I can be talked into it, right? There's 2 points that I will concede. If you got James Harden on a sweetheart deal, right? If you got him on a relative to his production level, or relative to what he would provide to this team, if you got him on a team-friendly deal, a sweetheart deal, and or the Rockets got Wembanyama, Because if you are telling me that the Rockets could walk away with the number 1 overall pick in the draft and pick up Wemby and then subsequently go scoop up James Harden and have a front court of Tari Eason, Jabari Smith Jr., Wembanyama, and then a backcourt of James Harden and Jalen Green, I'm all for it then. Because then I think Wemby is going to be not the only player, but he is going to be the guy in this year's draft that can directly translate to a team that wants to win right away. And even then, you're still asking a lot of a rookie to come in and be playing for a team that wants to play winning basketball right out the gate, right? To me, what a move like this would do with James Harden, if you wanted to go that route and sign James Harden back, is suddenly you are starting the clock on this team. Suddenly the expectations completely shift, right? No longer are you worried about linear development and getting better year by year. It's, hey, we've got James Harden right now. We don't know how good he's going to be for how much longer. We've got to start winning right now. And to me, that also puts development and growth for guys like Jalen, like Jabari, like Sengun, like whoever else on the roster, whatever rookie they draft this next season. The development becomes a secondary thought. It becomes about doing whatever you need to do to win on a nightly basis, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, does that potentially stunt the development of Jalen Green if you bring back James Harden and say, all right, it's his, he's going to run the show, he's doing everything, and we're focused on winning games, not necessarily growing our players to the best of our abilities.
I'm going to take my debate cap off for a second and kind of talk about a point you mentioned. I want to go into more support you with, and discuss what I've been hearing a lot. Well, Alykhan, James Harden can be and have a Chris Paul effect on this team. Now let's look at that Phoenix Suns team when Chris Paul joined, and why it's different, I would say, from this Rockets team. When Chris Paul joined that Phoenix team, they were coming off an 8-0 bubble season. Or a bubble run, not season, where they played exceptionally well, right? They were building.
It was a season. It was a whole year in that bubble.
They had habits. They had habits. And you bring in a guy who can elevate their habits into championship habits, right? I think James Harden can have that effect. Problem is, this team does not have habits. They have what I call bad habits. And let me tell you what those bad habits are, Jackson. Those bad habits are your guards, who usually are supposed to be the first ones back in transition, not getting back in transition, then getting beat by a full court running Trey Jones for a layup. Your bad habits are you're supposed to switch, not touching and guiding the switch, but lackadaisically going to the other player and pretty much creating an open driving lane towards the middle of the floor. Your bad habit is choosing and picking when to be able to play defense. Your bad habit is getting the ball and not looking to facilitate, but looking to score. Yeah, it's a scoring game. You want to score points. I get that. But when you have tunnel vision every time, it's not just a guard. Any player touches the ball, it's tunnel vision. Sengun, who knows when he's going to get an entry pass. So what does he do? He looks to score. Jabari Smith, oh my God, that dude touches the ball. It's like hot potato. Jacks up a shot. Jalen Green gets the ball. Sometimes we'll make a pass to LP or somebody else. What is he looking to do? Go north to south, attack and score. Kevin Porter Jr. He's kind of gotten away from being able to establish himself and be a good passer, which I know he can be. Eric Gordon gets the ball on the slot. He's jacking it up. It's this team right now, the way they're playing right now. I'm not saying this is how they've been playing for the season, but right now they're playing with bad habits. And bad habits come for even the best teams, right? Look at the Celtics on this losing streak. They're playing with they're having some bad habits, some bad losses, but just some bad habits are forming a little bit, right? The Rockets need to start playing more consistently. And until I see consistently good habits, I can't tell you right now that they're ready to even compete because they're still developing, right? And that is the only argument I see for now bringing in James Harden and giving Kevin Porter Jr. more time is because this is his second season as a point guard. I've never mentioned Kevin McHale on the show, but I'm going to mention Kevin McHale here. Kevin McHale used to have a saying that you are who you are your third or fourth year in the league. Okay? Now, Kevin Porter Jr. isn't his third or fourth year in the league. Difference is Kevin Porter Jr. is only his second year as a point guard. I am willing to give him some extra time to be able to develop and see what he goes into. But that means I need to see some progress between the rest of this season and going into next season. Because after that, that contract can become guaranteed, right? In terms of those high dollar amounts, right? I just right now, I think it's great in theory to have James Harden here because you're able to then establish yourself and play the style that Steven Silas wants to play the styles that clearly the front office wants to play, and do those things. Be able to actually get Sengun involved, take advantage of the spacing you actually do have in your starting lineup and make those cross-court passes. Jackson, you tweet about why doesn't Jabari Smith Jr. get the ball in the corner? Half the battle is getting him the ball because the players can't make that pass, right? James Harden can. So I know I kind of went in two directions there, but for me, it's really, really important to say that I don't even think, or my question to you actually, Jackson, is can you build these good habits I'm referring them to that they need to build without a structure that allows you to have a guard who can set these players up to see what you have?
I don't think and I agree. I think it's difficult, right? If you don't have a player that can be that guy, that can be that table setter, that can set guys up, then yeah, you're going to struggle. And I just my whole point is I don't think that guy has to be James Harden. And I've got a few more. I've got notes. I've got a page in front of me, Alykhan, of stuff that I wanted to bring up, just as bullets in the chamber, if you will, against the idea of bringing James Harden back to Houston. So we're going to keep this conversation focused here on the James Harden stuff. I think there might be a couple other things we bring up here in segment 3, but we're going to get there in just a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis this season. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball, all of it. They've got you covered for everything over at BetOnline. They are the fastest and easiest way to get all of your betting info right now. You can take a look at who the odds-on favorite is to go number 1 overall in this year's NBA draft. Spoiler alert, it's still Victor Wembanyama at minus 1,000. But right after Victor Wembanyama, there's a better chance for somebody other than Scoot Henderson to be selected number 1 overall. Right now, the other category is plus 825. Over at BetOnline, Scoot Henderson is plus 1,000 to be selected number 1 overall in the 2023 NBA draft. So for more odds like that one, be sure to visit betonline.net to learn more about the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, Alykhan, you brought up some very fantastic points there about a lot of the issues that this Rockets team is facing and how James Harden would address a fair number of those issues, mainly, right, the passing, the facilitating part. It feels like James Harden would be that piece that they're kind of, it feels like organizationally, coaching-wise, whatever, they're trying to make KPJ be that James Harden style player, that James Harden style piece for this Rockets offense, and that's just, it's an unfair expectation for him. It's not who he is truly as a player. I've said it time and time again, and I will continue to bang this drum, is I think KPJ is playing out of position at this point, and it's almost a disservice to him and to his skill as a basketball player to be expecting what they're expecting out of him right now. I do kind of agree that maybe, the experiment isn't completely over yet, right? Maybe you give him another year at point guard. I feel like maybe another year at point guard under a different coach, potentially. But as far as the James Harden situation and him potentially coming back to Houston, I would bring up the point that I think James has been the common denominator so often in the pairings and in the teams that haven't worked out. Like when you look across the board, right, against with all the different teammates, all the different guys that James Harden has been teammates with over the years, he had Dwight, he had CP3, he had Russ, he had KD and Kyrie. Now that situation's a little bit more. That was a powder keg, and that was ready to blow at any moment. So I don't want to fault James Harden for that one. But now he has Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, and he's got role players that are tailor-made to play alongside him and those two other stars. At what point, I had somebody in my mentions on Twitter said that James Harden and Victor Wembanyama is an instant contender. What is James Harden, Joel Embiid then? He's got the second best center in the league, or depending on who you talk, second best center in the league in Joel Embiid right now at this very moment. Victor Wembanyama is going to be good. He's not going to be that good right away. So I struggle to see how James being brought into a situation in Houston where this team still doesn't really have an identity. They've still got players who are figuring out who they are. And I think what I want to kind of bring up here is it depends on what the expectation would be for James Harden coming back. Is the expectation
100%.
for James Harden to come back and lead this team to the promised land and win a title, or to be a year in, year out, like playoff contender and, top 4 seed? If that's the expectation, I feel like that bar will never be met with
100%.
this version of James Harden. Now, if the expectation is to bring James Harden back because you need a guy who can be a facilitator, who can be a vocal leader, who can set guys up, who can teach guys how to play the game the right way, who can put guys in positions to be successful, I can buy into that idea a little bit more. But I think that version, right, that idea kind of, again, puts a cap on what some of these guys could potentially be on this roster, because you look at that money that you'd be committing to James Harden. And rather than letting Jalen and Jabari and Tari and KJ and, whoever else, Sengun, Kevin, rather than letting them continue to grow and develop at their own pace and, kind of all just naturally get better over time. And then once you feel that this team is ready to take a swing and to be relevant again, and either trading for a superstar or signing a star in free agency, what have you, somebody that matches their timeline a little bit more, who can be a complementary piece to what they're trying to accomplish. Rather than doing that, I feel like, again, you are kind of jumping the gun a little bit by bringing James Harden back in. If the goal is to be competitive at that point, is my thing. If you're bringing James Harden back in to ease and to aid the development of these guys, that changes the entire calculus of the situation for me personally. It's a thought to consider. And the only other point that I want to bring up here is James Harden is not exactly a guy who's known for James Harden has fantastic work ethic, right? But at the same time, under Mike D'Antoni, right, he didn't want to do practices, didn't want to do shoot arounds. He had complete control of the Rockets schedule. He kind of had his say of basically what he wanted to do happened, right? When he was here in Houston, he was the guy. And it was basically what James wanted, he got. And maybe that's a bit different this time around if he were to come back and it was, Rafael Stone instead of Daryl Morey, all of that. But at the same time, what examples does that potentially set for your young guys if you've got the veteran who comes back, who gets this big deal, comes back, is supposed to be the team leader, is supposed to be guiding these young guys, but isn't willing to put in the work behind the scenes? Because James Harden's been there, done that, right? He's James Harden. He doesn't need to put in the work, but the young guys do. The young guys need to have that culture, have that work ethic mentality, all of that. And I don't know if James Harden is that guy to provide that environment, right? Russell Westbrook didn't get along with James because of his work ethic. And
I will disagree with you on that. Not only because I did a story on James Harden as a leader in his time in Houston, but because there are some valid points you're making there. Right. But I do think that James Harden here, because of how much of a gym rat he is and how these Rockets young players are in the gym all the time, I think it would mesh really well in the relationships they already have off the court with James. I do want to say something, though. I think what you and I are both saying that we can agree on is the Rockets need a veteran point guard. Yeah. And which makes me, I questioned this a couple of years ago when it happened. I really don't think they should have not benched, but basically sent John Wall to train before they moved him. I think John Wall would have been the perfect player to be able to help this young team develop and grow, right?
Maybe not perfect, but he would have been significantly better than what they do have.
Let me rephrase perfect, right? He would have been a good addition, a veteran guy who can still play well in games and kind of take over if they needed a number one option, if they needed to, right? And just kind of help guide this team. And John Wall would have been what Eric Gordon kind of is right now, but at the point guard position instead of being played out of position, because that's what EG does, right? Is EG is that stabilizing force. He'll take over at times when he needs to, but otherwise he kind of stays out of the way. Yeah, and so that's my thought process. I think we both can agree that they do need some sort of veteran presence here, who is a point guard, not necessarily another type of veteran, to be able to do. That's why Daniel Tice didn't work out so well, right? A part of that was the on-court, but also that is that he wasn't a guard. He was a center, and he was playing with Sengun and all these other guys there as well. So just some other things to think about. I do want to bring up a few more quick things, Jackson. I sent out 2 polls this week on Twitter just to be able to gauge Rockets fans' perspective. Now, obviously, this is a Twitter poll. This does not take into account all the Rockets perspectives that we have with our listeners and on different platforms, but I wanted to at least get a sneak peek at some things. So I asked 2 questions, and I want to be able to share those results with our listeners. The first question was, do the Rockets run plays or actions? And we talked about this on the last show. Jackson, what did we say last time we talked about this? Do the Rockets run plays or actions?
We actually, I think we talked about this 2 shows ago. Maybe we're blurring them together, but yes, they do. They do run plays and actions. They are just really, 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 really bad at executing plays and actions.
And what did we talk about? Like I said this, and you said a scout mentioned it too. That what happens to those plays?
They get blown up. They turn into broken plays constantly, which then turn into KPJ and Jalen Green isolations.
All these really pretty plays you see other teams run, like, for example, Spain pick and roll, or if you refer to a stack pick and roll, which is involving 3 guys middle of the floor, kind of setting a back screen or things like that. I'm not going to get into specifics now, but other teams run that. Rockets run it too. What's the difference between the other teams and the Rockets? Other teams run it a lot more efficiently and effectively than the Rockets do. But I was pretty surprised at the results, Jackson. 74% of Rockets fans who answered that poll, 714 votes, said the Rockets do not run plays or actions. I'm here to tell you, if you put no on that, the Rockets do run plays or actions. We've talked about it. I'll just throw out some different names. They run something called 21 series, which we've talked about a lot. They run a lot of double drag. There's a lot of different things that they run, honestly. So that's one thing. Second poll I put out there, and it's still ongoing. And by the time you may be listening to the show, the poll may be over. But right now, almost 800 votes in, I asked who's to blame for the Rockets' struggles. And if you were to only pick one, and had 3 options. I didn't put none of the above. You had to pick one. That's why it's in the question. If you were to pick only one, players, coaches, or front office. My intent is not to assign blame. It's just to get an idea who Rockets fans right now, if they had to pick someone or a collection of group of individuals, who would they pick? Almost 70% blame the Rockets' struggles on coaches. Second place is 17% players. 13% front office. Very interesting that the group of individuals who put this team together, who drafted 4 young first round draft picks, who have not traded Eric Gordon away, who are surrounding this team with guard heavy play, who gave Bruno Fernando an extension before the start of the season, which kind of hinted that he was going to start, is only getting 13% of the blame from people who have voted so far. I think that's just very interesting. I want to just point that fact out there. Not saying coaches are not at fault. Definitely not saying that. Not saying the players are not at fault, because you've heard me talk about what the players have done wrong. I just think it's very interesting, Jackson, that only 13% of fans at this point in time when we're recording the show pick the front office as their one to pick to blame for the Rockets' struggles.
Well, I mean, look, I've kind of gone through varying degrees of like, okay, well, where do you assign blame? Whose fault is X, Y, Z, whatever. And, throughout all of this, I think the one that the lightning rod, if you will, right, is Kevin Porter Jr. And we talk about KPJ all the time. Is he a point guard? Is he not a point guard? What's he doing right? What's he doing wrong? All this stuff. And for a little while there, I was very honed in on what Kevin was or wasn't doing wrong, and then I kind of started shifting my viewpoint towards a bit more towards the coaching staff. Well, what system is he being given to run? Right? He's being tasked with running a read and react system, and he's not a natural point guard, so that's got to be really difficult. You're doing it with a bunch of young guys who aren't executing well. Like, it's what benefits is the coaching staff giving him? What tools and resources is he getting from the coaching staff to put him in the best, most optimal position to run this team? Right? So then I started shifting my gaze a bit towards the coaching staff, but then I started kind of realizing, even then, if you're the coaching staff, right, and your point guard, the guy who's supposed to be getting everybody involved and getting guys set up and setting the table, like we talked about, right, getting guys in the right positions, all of that, and finding them, if that's who you got, if that's the best option you have, then that's on the front office, right? And the front office is very clearly dug in on the idea of Kevin Porter Jr. being the point guard, right?
They gave him an extension, albeit you can call it a team-friendly extension, but that's a big commitment to make, no matter what.
They gave him the extension. They iced John Wall for a year and paid him $44 million to not play any basketball. And they did it under the express intent of giving KPJ the keys to the offense, the keys to the organization, if you will, right? Because they have given Kevin so much responsibility, so much runway. And I think that is very much like, that's not just a coaching thing, right? Like that, the way that they talk about it, the way that they're constantly Jalen and Kevin, Jalen and Scoot. Jr. Yeah, and for better or for worse, right? And again, maybe it works out. Maybe Kevin turns a corner and maybe he starts looking fantastic and he cuts down on the turnovers, and maybe he does turn into this transcendent, like, oh my God, there was a diamond, there this whole time, and Rafael Stone looks like a genius for getting him from the Cavaliers for nothing. Like, but I feel like we've seen enough of it to know that that's not going to be what it is, right? Maybe Kevin McHale's onto something here. You are who you are, right? Like. And Kevin is incredibly talented. He's a fantastic basketball player. But I've made this point on Rockets Watch, and I'll make it again here just in case I haven't made it here before, because all these Rockets content things, they start to blur together over time. Kevin is a weapon, right? He's a weapon. You have to point him. You have to point him in the right direction, right? You have to utilize him properly. And I don't think that the Rockets are utilizing him properly. And I think that's because they are bought in on this idea of him being a point guard and him running the show, and that's just not who he is as a player. And it's a disservice to him, and it's also a disservice to the coaching staff for them not having an actual point guard to run the show and to help other guys get involved, because that is also slowing down the progression, the development of guys like Jalen and Jabari and Sengun, who are suffering because they don't have a guy who can actually get them the basketball and get them in the spots where they can be successful.
One last thing I want to point out. I don't attend games regularly as I used to anymore. I don't attend practices like I used to, like you do, Jackson. I don't believe Rafael Stone has spoken to the media since before the start of the season, correct? I would love to be able to learn more about whether or not, I would love to be able to hear from his mouth, and representing the front office and the ownership and the coaching staff, what do they think their goal is with each of their individual players? Like, what do they envision out of Kevin Porter Jr.? And maybe, like, if he talks trade deadline, normally the GM will talk around trade deadline time. So if he does, what do they envision for Kevin Porter Jr. over the course of the rest of the season? What do they envision for Jalen Green? What do they envision for Alperen Sengun? What do they envision for Jabari Smith? I think, when we're looking at Alp, he's a second-year player. He's going to go into his third year next year. Guy's clearly talented. Guy clearly has some weaknesses, especially defensively, that he needs to work on. But he's somebody who has some promise, right? Jalen Green, you're hoping he can turn into that superstar guy. He has flashes of it. Kevin Porter Jr., clearly your point guard. What is their vision for each of their players? Right now, I feel like they look. I'm not looking at I'm not looking at all of them as a team. I'm looking at all of them as individual players, and I'm eager to see and hear on record what the front office believes their vision is for each of those players.
I mean, at this point, I would love to hear it as well, because I think there's almost a distinct lack of like a coherent vision at this point, I think, for the team. And I think that's
why fans struggle. That's why that poll, those two polls I mentioned to you, mainly the one about the blame. Yeah, I at some point I could have put an option that I don't know, right? Because we don't know. But why? For those who don't know, part of that reason they don't know is because they don't understand. I mean, we don't understand sometimes, Jackson, what the vision is for this team. So I don't blame fans for not knowing who to blame, right? So it's something that I think fans would like answers to. I think you will ask those questions when you have a chance to speak to Rafael Stone and whoever else from the front office talks to the media. I think it's just a good way to be able to get some transparency about what their thoughts are about what's currently on the court and kind of what they envision with those key pieces moving forward this season.
This felt like a cathartic conversation, Alykhan. Anything else you want to add before we shut this thing down?
Man, you know what? There was a quote that came out last night from Adam Spillane of Sports Radio 610, okay? Now, he provided the whole context. I'm not going to say the quote. You've probably seen it. A lot of people got angry about it. I thought it was hilarious. So Jackson and I spent last night texting, or after the game texting, a lot of memes to each other. And let me just tell you, man, I think the Grinch stole the Rockets 3-point shooting, Jackson.
And I still think that I had the more clever pun because it was definitely Christmas with the Clanks in Houston after that game. So
I heard you have a Home Alone one. Do you want to share that one, Jackson?
Home Alone 2, Lost on Defense. That was the Home Alone one, which is oh God, what a way to wrap this one up. But Alykhan, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
You can follow me on Twitter, Rockets_insider. So I've been told that I need to put out more X's and O's content, quick videos. Well, good news, Rockets fans. I will be putting a lot of stuff out over the next few weeks on X's and O's context, quick 45-second to a minute 30 long videos. Please, 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 if you are not doing so, this is my first time doing this, Jackson. Maybe people will actually follow me. Follow me on Instagram. It's Alykhan Bijani, NBA. Or follow me on TikTok. It's also Rockets_insider. I will be posting videos on both those platforms.
Because Twitter is going down into flames.
No, not that. But YouTube is coming too. I'll have YouTube content out too. But just please take advantage of that. I found a good platform that I want to be able to put videos out of. So clips, regular clips, all the time coming your way there. So please make sure to follow me on those platforms.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked on Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked on Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Drop us some thoughts. Would you want to see James Harden back in a Houston Rockets jersey? Let us know in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.
Thank you.